Hey there, awesome human. Where in the world are you watching from? A sleepy little village or a buzzing megacity? Drop your location in the comments. I love seeing how far we reach. And if you enjoy this video, don't keep it a secret. Share it with your crew. Let's roll. My name is Henry Warren Cooper. I serve as a senior accountant at Taft, Coleridge and Woolwich, a respected Boston-based firm with a long-standing reputation. I'm 50 now, and I've reached the peak of what's available to me within the company. My specialty lies in corporate tax planning, and within the firm, I'm widely considered the definitive expert in that domain. My compensation totals $85,000 a year, supplemented by a generous benefits package. Physically, I'm in excellent shape for a man of my age, something I attribute to consistent workouts and a disciplined diet. This coming May will mark 26 years since I married Evelyn Davis Cooper. But more and more, I find myself wondering if we'll make it to 27. Evelyn, or Edie, as I often call her, is what some would label a cultural impresario, a producer of live performances who manages everything from logistics to promotion. She organizes and oversees theatrical shows and musical events at some of the city's most prominent venues. Her career has steadily climbed over the years and remains strong. At 48, she's still elegant and poised, and easily among the most eye-catching figures in Boston's high society circles. She photographs beautifully, and her picture frequently appears in local lifestyle magazines and arts columns. Early in our marriage, we had to face a hard truth. We wouldn't be able to have children. The doctors confirmed that the issue wasn't on my end. Edie had a medical condition that made pregnancy impossible. She took the news with quiet dignity, while I found it deeply disheartening. I had always imagined raising children. She'd said she wanted the same. We briefly explored adoption, but circumstances always seemed to delay the process. Eventually, those talks stopped altogether, fading until they disappeared. In the beginning, I was the sole provider. My income was modest, but enough to support us in a small Needham apartment. The early days were lean, but as my salary grew, our lives gradually became more comfortable. After it became clear that children weren't in our future, Edie decided to seek employment. I didn't oppose her. She was too intelligent, too vibrant to stay home alone all day. I encouraged her to find something meaningful to do, not out of necessity, but because it felt right. As if by fate, she quickly landed a job at a small booking agency. The firm specialized in supplying performers, musicians, comedians, dancers, and actors for clubs, ad campaigns, theater productions, and TV appearances. Though the business wasn't widely known, Edie adapted to it effortlessly. Within 2 years, she had nearly increased their bookings by a third. Suddenly, this once overlooked agency became a noteworthy player in Boston's entertainment market. Her boss, Alan Hartley, was thrilled. Edie wasn't just bringing in business, she was carving out a place among Boston's top advertising and entertainment circles. Her visibility surged, and soon she became a well-known figure among influential clients and industry leaders. By the time she turned 35, Edie had become a recognized name in the city's cultural scene. Around then, her income surpassed mine. With that shift, the balance between us began to change. Edie gained a strong sense of independence and gradually took the lead in our shared decisions. She began choosing our social engagements, the restaurants we'd frequent, and eventually, the home we would live in. She insisted on upgrading to a more fashionable address. Only something in Back Bay would satisfy her. It was a financial stretch, but Edie was determined. Fortunately, her earnings kept pace with her ambition, and we managed to afford the large, renovated townhouse she had set her sights on. You might assume I simply gave in, that I let her dominate our shared life without resistance. But that's not how it happened. The transformation was so incremental I hardly recognized it as it was happening. By the time I fully grasped the shift, my place in the marriage had already been redefined. There was no reclaiming the old roles. There's a saying that success feeds itself, and in Edie's case, that was absolutely true. After several successful years with Alan's agency, she'd built up a powerful network of clients. Then, without warning, and without asking anyone's opinion, least of all mine, she decided to break away and form her own firm. She presented it to me as a fait accompli, just as she had with Alan. At 37, she launched her own agency and quickly took most of Alan Hartley's biggest accounts with her. I didn't feel it was my place to object. By then, her income had soared far beyond mine, and much of what we owned, our house, our portfolio, was tied to the fruits of her labor. I had become a background figure in our financial story. Don't get me wrong, we were still close in many ways. There was affection, intimacy, and she seemed to find real comfort in having me nearby during quiet moments. That comfort, I suspect, might have blinded me to how much our emotional bond was subtly shifting. Was I happy? For the most part, yes. Edie had discovered her true vocation and excelled in it. I shared in the safety and consistency her success brought. Each day, I arrived at the office without anxiety, without dread. I knew my job inside and out, so thoroughly, in fact, that it had slipped from routine into something resembling dull repetition. There was no hint of disruption, no forthcoming shift to jolt things awake. And so I stayed where I was, holding my post at TC&W. I never blamed my work for the stress I occasionally carried. It didn't feel like the source. As Edie's presence in the public eye grew, her time at home seemed to diminish in equal measure. Her schedule became a constant blur of product unveilings, charity events, and glittering galas. She always made a point to invite me along, but in truth, Edie had a quiet understanding of where I didn't quite fit. We both seemed to know, without ever needing to say it, that her sphere operated at a tempo I wasn't built for. I joined her when the event called for a spouse, but most of the time she moved through that world solo, circulating, connecting, posing with dignitaries and influencers. I felt more like a piece of decor than a partner. Once we hit our 40s, Edie's standing in Boston's elite circles only solidified. Her company was flourishing, and the financial returns were astonishing. I still remember it clearly. 3 years back, sitting across from our tax advisor as he mentioned, almost casually, that Edie had crossed the $500,000 mark in yearly earnings. The figure stunned me. I nearly tipped backward in my chair. Even Edie looked momentarily shaken, as though the magnitude of her own success had caught her off guard. Most of the money sat quietly in a Fannie Mae money market account, the rest in her day-to-day checking. That meeting shifted something between us, though I couldn't have pinpointed it at the time. Our relationship began to evolve, less of the traditional model, more of a custom arrangement. Privately, we still enjoyed each other's company, and our shared quiet moments held a certain peace. But in public settings, Edie seemed to put subtle distance between us. Was she ashamed? Did my understated career and quiet temperament jar too much with her charisma and refined image? What I did know was this: our social lives ran on separate tracks. The friends in our circle were mostly mine. I quickly learned to keep guest lists separate when Edie hosted. My friends rarely found a foothold in those settings, and I'd end up feeling misplaced on their behalf. I raised the issue more than once, hoping she'd hear me, but she always dismissed it, suggesting I was imagining things. So here we are, me and my elegant, ambitious, effortlessly graceful wife, living in a marriage that doesn't follow conventional rules, but works in its own way. I wouldn't call myself a head-turner, but I don't believe I'm unpleasant to look at either. My hair, though streaked with gray, is still thick, and my weight has remained fairly steady since my 20s. Thanks to Edie's generosity, my clothes are high-end, and our lifestyle is nothing if not lively. We still tell each other we're in love. There hasn't been any real cause for alarm. At least not until recently. "Henry, can we talk?" Edie asked one evening as we stood side by side loading the dishwasher. "Of course," I said. "What's going on?" She paused. "This might be awkward. Let's sit down in the living room." That alone was unusual. I followed her in and took my usual spot on the sofa. She chose the armchair across from me. "I'm not quite sure how to begin," she said, visibly uneasy. "You know I love you. I've always felt we're soulmates, that kind of connection. I would never want to hurt you." I sat completely still, every instinct in me warning that something big, possibly painful, was coming. I held my breath, bracing for impact. "I've been feeling this Hollowness, she said carefully. Like something's missing, and I've been trying to understand what it is. I focused all my willpower on staying quiet, even as my nerves frayed beneath the surface. There was a tightness growing behind my eyes. I've thought about what it might be like to have a lover, she said at last. She held my gaze steadily, watching for a reaction. My thoughts raced wildly. Still, I kept my face composed. I needed to hear everything, whatever it was, no interruptions. Henry, I hope you believe me when I say this has nothing to do with how I feel about you. Not as a husband, not as a partner, not even as a lover. You've been wonderful, always. She was twisting her hands in her lap now, visibly distressed. It's just, there's this thing inside me I can't ignore anymore. And I could never be dishonest with you, not about this. That's why I had to tell you now face to face, she said. Only then did I finally exhale, realizing I'd been holding my breath the entire time. A faint, prolonged whistle escaped my lips, barely audible, as I tried to make sense of the chaos in my head. But I kept still. I clung to the silence, uncertain of how to break it open. No words surfaced. Not yet. So I waited. Disappointment was etched into her expression like it had been carved there. She had expected a different response, but I didn't react the way she'd hoped. My voice carries a deep, natural resonance, something I've always credited to my lineage. People have compared it more than once to James Earl Jones. Some women have gone as far as saying they don't just hear my voice, they feel it vibrate through them. They talk about its power, its presence. I take those words as compliments. Over time, I've learned how to wield that gift. But Edie? She's rarely witnessed that side of me. Eventually, I ended the silence. No, I said, low but steady. What? She blinked, caught off guard. I'm saying no, I repeated, calm and firm. You can't just say that, Henry. This matters to me, she said, her voice edging toward a plea. Evelyn, I answered, voice still composed but unmoving. I will not condone betrayal. I have remained faithful from the very beginning. Since we stood together in that church, I've held true to our vows. I made a promise to you and to myself, one I fully intend to keep, and I expect nothing less from you. But Henry, she started again, her tone turning more desperate. No, this time it came out sharper, harder. Don't try to push this any further. You already know where I stand. I'm not budging. The finality in my voice was unmistakable, quietly furious and resolved. I stood up, casting a look in her direction, a mix of grief and disdain. Without another word, I walked out and shut the study door behind me. Sinking into the leather chair, I leaned back, trying to find my center again. My thoughts were tangled, caught somewhere between disbelief and damage control. No matter what happened next, we couldn't return to what we were. At best, the dynamic would shift forever. At worst, this could mean the end of us. I got up, opened my private cabinet, and retrieved a decanter and an aged bottle of cognac. It had been a while since I'd needed anything stronger than a glass of wine, but tonight clearly warranted something more potent. Inhaling deeply, I tried to gather myself. Had there been clues? Hints I'd ignored or brushed aside? Nothing surfaced. The weight of the present was too heavy to sift through memories. All I could do was replay the core of it all. She had asked for permission to take a lover. Dress it up however you want. That was her request. She wanted me to be complicit in my own humiliation. That was never going to happen. But darker thoughts began to fester. Had she already done it? Was this conversation just an attempt to clean up something she'd already committed? There were no answers. How could there be? And why now? Was it about another man? A craving for something different? The pull of fading youth? Or was it something colder, more strategic? If she was playing a longer game, I couldn't yet see the shape of it. But the implications circled me like vultures. Ironically, I held the stronger legal position if things unraveled. She earned far more. If it came to court, the law would likely side with me. Alimony, property. Most of it would come my way. So why would she risk everything? Her career, her reputation, her social image, was she really prepared to blow it all up for an affair? Something didn't make sense. I took a careful sip of the cognac. The warmth spread slowly through me, grounding my nerves. Strangely, I didn't feel as shattered as I thought I should. That realization caught me off guard. Why wasn't I in pieces? Had some part of me seen this unraveling from the start? It didn't seem like it. Yet maybe some corner of me had always known. Had we drifted apart without my noticing? Was it the gap between her high-profile world and my ordinary existence? Had I subconsciously started viewing her as an obligation rather than a companion? I had no clear answers, just 1,000 questions spiraling in my mind. But gradually, a quiet, seething anger began to stir within me. There was something in her tone lately, something condescending. She had assumed I'd simply nod along, maybe talk it through rationally. Never in a million years did she expect me to flat-out deny her. Now that I reflect on it, I know I made the right call. No was the only answer I could give her. Leaning back into my chair, I realized that single word wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. She would circle back somehow, maybe not head-on, but she'd find another way. I had to stay alert. Something inside me had shifted. My faith in Edie had fractured. It was as if the betrayal had already happened, and I was just now seeing the fallout. So what now? What was my next move? My instinct told me to hire a private investigator, to let someone else uncover whatever she was hiding. But I had nothing substantial to give him. No leads, no proof, no direction. Maybe I was jumping the gun. I needed to dig a little on my own first, get a clearer picture before dragging in outside help. One thing was certain. Edie wouldn't be staying home much this week. That gave me a small window, an opening to search for answers. In the meantime, I had to do something to throw her off balance. The idea came to me almost immediately. I'd pack up some things and move into the guest room. Let her sleep alone. Let her feel the absence. That would shake her at least a little. It was still early, not even 9 o'clock. I got up, stepped into the hallway, and pulled on a windbreaker from the closet. The house was silent. Edie was gone. I opened the door and stepped out into the night air. I needed to cool off, yes, but more than that, I just couldn't stay in that house another second. It felt suffocating, like a cage. As I walked, the heat of my anger began to melt into something quieter, more sorrowful. Was this really how it all ended? Was I witnessing the slow disintegration of a marriage I'd always thought was steady and full of meaning? I didn't want to believe that, but maybe it was true. At some point, I stopped paying attention to where I was going. When I finally looked up, I was far from home. But the distance helped. My thoughts were clearer. I felt steadier. I began thinking more strategically about how to act around Edie moving forward. Should I give her the cold shoulder, shut her out completely, or act as if nothing had changed? Would it be better to meet her with controlled fury every time we talked? Or should I consider leaving for a while? Each option had its consequences. But the more I weighed them, the more one thing became undeniable. I needed clarity. I needed to hear her out. I needed to know what she was really thinking, what she truly wanted. That was the only way I'd make sense of this. I couldn't live in this fog of suspicion and silence. I wouldn't let her manipulate me, not anymore. And I definitely wasn't going to let her reduce me to some oblivious fool. Chapter 2. A grave miscalculation. Evelyn. I seriously misjudged the situation. What on earth made me think Henry would be okay with me having a lover? Even now, I can't quite process how firmly he shot me down. He didn't even consider it. Didn't ask a single question. Just gave a flat-out no. No dialogue. No delay. Just an impenetrable wall. It took me by surprise. I'm not used to being denied. Rejection isn't something I've had to handle often, and this one hit harder than I expected. I honestly believed I had prepared him for the idea. I thought he'd get it, understand that this meant something to me. He's always been generous with me, always found a way to give me what I needed. So why not this? His reaction made me rethink everything. I do love Henry, I truly do. But at the same time, I crave more. I'm nearing 50, and I feel a fire building in me. A need for passion, for vitality, for desire. Henry's a wonderful man, even an attentive lover. But this isn't about sex, it never was. He occupies every corner of my heart, and no one has ever treated me with such gentle devotion. I couldn't have imagined a partner more caring, more deeply loving. And yet, a restless longing still lingers inside me. I've ruined everything. I confessed to him what had been running through my mind. Foolishly, I handed him a reason to question my loyalty. How can I possibly follow through now when he's always watching? Why did I say anything at all? What kind of fool lays the groundwork for her own downfall? All I've done is make it harder to be unfaithful. But the choice was made long ago. I am going to do it. My only mistake was how I went about it. My entire approach was flawed. What I need now is a pause, a moment to breathe, to reflect, to reconfigure. I wandered through the house without direction, until I noticed his study door ajar, but he wasn't there. The living room, empty. The kitchen, no sign of him. One look in the hallway closet told me what I feared. His windbreaker was missing, so he was too. Where had he gone? Would he come back tonight? Anxious dread began to coil in my stomach. The situation was slipping out of my control. I poured myself a stiff gin and tonic, pacing the floors. Henry never owned a cell phone. There was no way to reach him. Even if he had one, would he answer my call? I needed a reset, some way to rewind this chaos I'd created. But I knew any repair would be slow and far from simple. Still, I had to find a path back to him. I looked at the clock again, the 100th glance of the evening. It was already 10:30, and still no sign of him. The night outside felt vast, unknowable, and I had no idea where he could be. We didn't own a car, so he must have left on foot or hailed a cab. But when had he ever just disappeared like this, without a word? What if something had gone wrong? What if he'd been mugged, or worse? I drifted into his study and saw the brandy decanter on the side table. It was nearly empty, with just a trace of amber liquid left in a single glass. So he'd had at least one drink before leaving. I took a sip. The brandy stung my throat, but I didn't mind. My thoughts were murky, and my mind felt untethered. I wasn't thinking clearly anymore. It was past 11 when I finally heard the front door creak open. I rushed to the living room, heart pounding, desperate for it to be him. And there he was, slipping off his jacket with deliberate care, placing it neatly on the hook. He didn't look at me. "Where have you been, Henry?" "I've been going out of my mind with worry." "I just needed some air," he replied, his voice steady and unreadable. "I had to clear my thoughts." His tone offered neither comfort nor accusation. "I'm sorry," I said quietly. "I never meant to hurt you. You have to believe that. I don't even know why I let those thoughts take hold." But the apology fell flat. No words could undo the damage, not tonight. I just wanted him to say something. "Anything I could hold on to. I'll move into the guest room," he said calmly. "That's where I'll sleep for now." "No, Henry, please," I begged. "Don't shut me out. Talk to me, say something." Yes, I was pleading, openly, shamelessly. I didn't care anymore. I had to try. He finally turned to look at me, his expression cold, his gaze unreadable. "I don't want to share a bed with you tonight," he said, his voice level, emotionless. "And I'm not ready to talk. We'll discuss everything tomorrow, if we do at all." His words were low, final, immovable. They silenced me completely. I had nothing left to say, only the hollow ache of regret and powerlessness. I was the one who had opened the gate, and now it was my responsibility to find a way to lead him calmly back inside. "Henry, please, can we talk?" "Not now," he replied, his voice cool and distant. "I'll speak when I'm ready, not before that." For the first time, I saw a flash of anger break through his usually composed expression. I'd gone too far, pressed a boundary I shouldn't have. There was nothing more I could do but wait. Wait until he chose to come back to me on his own terms. I had no other option. Wordlessly, I turned and climbed the stairs to our room, each step weighted with a sense of defeat. I already knew I'd be sleeping alone that night. In truth, I wasn't sure I'd sleep at all. At some point, exhaustion must have taken over. I drifted into a restless slumber, though I couldn't pinpoint when. When morning arrived, it dragged in slowly, and I woke feeling more drained than when I'd closed my eyes. Eventually, I pulled myself out of bed, wrapped a robe around me, and made my way to the kitchen. As I passed the guest room, something stopped me. The bed was made. Henry was no longer there. By the time I reached the kitchen, it was obvious he had already left for work. His used dishes sat in the sink, untouched, and the coffee maker stood quiet, one mug already taken. I poured myself a cup, sensing it would be the first of many today. Once in my office, I went through the messages and called the front desk to say I'd be out for the afternoon. Then it hit me. There was a film premiere scheduled for that evening. The thought of going made my stomach turn, especially if there was a chance Henry might be ready to talk. But backing out wasn't an option. Still, none of it mattered more than finding a way to make things right with him. I had to begin somewhere. And something deep down told me this would only be the first in a long line of apologies I'd have to offer in the days to come. Chapter 3. The Recovery Plan. Henry. That morning I made sure to leave before Edie woke up. Anything to sidestep a confrontation. I needed time to clear my head and chart a way forward. I remembered she had an event scheduled for later that night. That gave me the perfect opportunity. Some breathing room, a window to regroup. Delaying the hard conversation gave me time to begin peeling back the layers, to start searching for what was hidden beneath the surface. Given her track record, only something catastrophic would make her skip a high-profile engagement. Maybe it was the long, solitary walk I took the night before, or perhaps the clarity that came from imagining a new version of myself. Whatever the reason, I woke up feeling better than I had in weeks. Clearer. Focused. For the first time in ages, I had a sense of purpose. A rough plan was beginning to take shape. I felt energized. The version of me that had quietly endured, Henry Cooper, ever supportive, always agreeable, was no more. The man Edie was familiar with had already started to fade. The one I was becoming would likely surprise her. No more silent concessions. No more self-erasure. From here on, I would speak my mind. This was the groundwork for my transformation. The hours passed with quiet intention. I told my assistant to hold all non-urgent calls. Just before 3 p.m., as I'd anticipated, Edie called. She left a voicemail, said she'd be at the theater that evening and wouldn't make it home for dinner. There was a heaviness in her voice, a sincere note of regret. She promised we'd talk tomorrow. That suited me just fine. I wrapped up at work a little earlier than usual and arrived home with time to spare. Dinner, as usual, was a solitary affair. I threw together something simple: a bowl of soup, a sandwich, and a glass of red. It was sufficient. Low effort, easy to clean up. Then I got to work. I started with her computer. Edie was never especially comfortable with tech, and I was fairly certain she still used Outlook to manage her calendar and email, same as I did. But I was surprised to find the account locked behind a password. I hadn't expected that. I didn't even know she knew how to set one up. That raised a question: what was she trying to keep from me? I began trying the usual suspects: birth dates, pet names, obvious combinations. No luck. Given her general indifference toward digital things, I doubted the code was complex. It had to be something close to home. After exhausting the predictable, I sat back and looked around. Then I noticed something. Her monitor was propped up slightly on a cushioned pad. I lifted the edge and found a small piece of paper tucked underneath. It listed 4 alphanumeric strings, each 8 characters long. I tried the last one. The screen came alive. Her inbox held almost nothing. But she'd organized her email into multiple folders, each clearly labeled. Most seemed like ordinary business files. Still, I dove in, one folder at a time, reading each message, opening every document, turning over every stone. It was tedious, but I was committed. Eventually, I opened the file labeled Jeannie and was met with a string of emails addressed to someone by that name. Right away, they felt different from anything else I'd seen. The language was intimate, personal, almost like reading entries from a private diary. It became apparent that these weren't just casual messages. They were deeply personal letters to another woman. With each new email, it was clear just how much Edie had entrusted to this Jeannie. She poured out details of her everyday life, her thoughts about me, her friends, her work, all of it. By the time I finished the 5th message, I had to pause to collect myself. There was a longing in her words, a restless need for excitement or change. She wrote that she loved me, but the feeling was tangled with a wish for something unexpected to break through the dullness. Whatever that something was, it remained vague, until the night before, when she finally gave it shape. I continued reading, going through one message after another. It felt like listening in on a one-sided therapy session. Edie confessing to an invisible presence, hoping the act of speaking would bring clarity. Then I noticed something peculiar, not a single reply from Jeannie. Only Edie's voice echoed through the digital pages. Had the responses been deleted? I checked the trash. Nothing. All I could be sure of was that Edie had been laying bare parts of herself, deeply private parts, to someone who wasn't me. For over an hour, I kept reading. Then I stumbled on a message titled Family, and it stopped me cold. What I found in that email shattered something inside me. Edie admitted that early in our marriage, she had made a conscious choice to avoid pregnancy. She never wanted children. All along, she'd let me believe it was a medical issue, while secretly using birth control. Later, once her career was stable, she underwent a tubal ligation to make sure she'd never be caught off guard. Her explanation? She didn't want motherhood to interfere with her social calendar. Once she returned to work, staying child-free became her priority. She had only pretended to sympathize with my grief. The depth of her deception stunned me. It had been flawless. Not once had I doubted her. Not until now. The fury that hit me was swift and all-consuming. This wasn't a misunderstanding, as it was a calculated, ongoing betrayal. We had talked about having kids for years, even before we were married. And now, realizing the truth behind those conversations felt like a punch to the chest. As I sat there, trying to comprehend it all, I recalled the thoughts I'd had just the night before. Somewhere inside, I had always sensed that Edie lived for her own pleasure. She pursued comfort, excitement, indulgence, often without much regard for the consequences or for me. And I had let it slide. I never held her accountable, never pushed back. Because of that, she never felt the need to change. But I saw now how much damage that had caused. While I bent to make things work, she never wavered in her self-interest. She never saw a reason to meet me halfway. That was going to change. She was about to meet a version of me she'd never seen before. How she'd handle that, I didn't know. And frankly, I no longer cared. She had stolen from me the future I'd envisioned, a family we'd talked about, and that was unforgivable. Whether or not she had ever been unfaithful in body remained a question. But I kept searching the folder anyway, hoping to uncover something more concrete. There was nothing else as explosive. Still, it was obvious that Jeannie knew far too much about our life. Edie had written freely about our relationship, including the intimate parts. From what she said, she seemed satisfied, even content, with our connection, physically and emotionally. There were no hints of mistreatment, no cries for help, no secret pain. That only made her words the night before all the more baffling. I combed through the rest of her email folders, hoping for more clarity. But all I found were work-related messages, nothing personal, nothing that revealed more of her inner world. Feeling numb, I closed the computer and logged out. I sat in silence, the weight of it all pressing down. It was 10 p.m. I couldn't take in any more. 10 minutes later, I was lying alone in the guest bedroom. Despite everything, sleep came quickly, though my mind was far from at peace. I never heard her come home. The next morning, I woke before the sun, but the night's rest had been fractured, filled with unsettling dreams that vanished the moment I opened my eyes. I drifted in and out of sleep for hours, each time jolting awake. Not from specific memories, but from the crushing, inescapable weight of everything I now knew. Much like the morning before, I slipped out to work before Edie woke. It wasn't typical for us to go an entire day without speaking, but yesterday had unfolded in strained silence, a kind of emotional stalemate. Today, we were both under the same roof again, and I knew the conversation we'd both been avoiding was now inevitable. Each hour that passed only sharpened my focus. All that was left was to decide how I'd say what needed saying. One thing I was sure of, I'd be in control this time. The terms wouldn't be Evelyn's to set anymore. Chapter 4. The Reckoning. Evelyn. Another night without rest. I got home late after the theater's opening, completely spent. You'd think exhaustion alone would have knocked me out. But my head was in such chaos I never managed to fall asleep. 2 nights running on fumes was not ideal. Not with the kind of conversation that lay ahead. Maybe I could sneak in a nap before Henry returned. At the event I did what I had to, smiled, mingled with the usual faces, but I couldn't stay present long enough to leave any real impression. Maybe some rest before tonight's confrontation would help settle me. Lying there that morning, I tried to chart a course forward. I had to convince Henry that the whole affair idea had vanished. He needed to believe that last night's emotional mess was just a flare-up. A hormonal hiccup, not something deeper. Surely he'd buy that. I'd stopped my hormone therapy recently. Those scary new studies pushed me into quitting. Maybe I could hang my meltdown on that. I'd talked to Vanes about our argument. She didn't hold back, told me I'd acted recklessly. She's always known I've toyed with the idea of being with someone else. Not that she approves. She warned me Henry wouldn't forgive something like that. Vanes never got why I'd even think of betraying him. To her, he's the dream husband. And she's not wrong. He's almost too good to be real. So why am I drawn to wrecking what we have? Why do I believe I can have him and chase some foolish fantasy? What is wrong with me? It's not like I don't know what other men are like. I've seen enough to know Henry's in a league of his own. So why the self-sabotage? Am I unraveling? Is this a cry for help? Is menopause scrambling my thoughts? The questions kept piling up, each one louder than the last. But I wouldn't find answers lying still. I needed to get up, take a shower, eat something, pull myself together before tonight. I had to face him steady and calm. Henry wasn't going to steer the conversation again. The hours crawled by. After lunch, I finally managed to nap for almost 2 hours. It did me some physical good. But the nerves, still buzzing under my skin. If I couldn't settle them soon, tonight would unravel fast. By 5:30, I gave in and made myself a stiff gin and tonic. Something to dull the edges. Henry walked in, right on schedule, just before 6. I was in the kitchen, food nearly done, waiting for him. I'd made one of his favorite meals, hoping it might warm him up a bit. But even with alcohol dulling my thoughts, I felt unmoored. I poured another drink as soon as I heard the sound of his wine glass filling. His footsteps echoed down the hall. "Hi, Henry," I called, trying to sound natural, though the tension in my voice probably gave me away. "Evelyn." He used my full name, something he hadn't done since that night. Still, it meant he was acknowledging me. "Dinner's nearly ready. Why don't you freshen up and pour yourself some wine?" I tried to sound breezy, like everything was fine. He gave a short nod and walked upstairs. While he was gone, I fixed myself another drink, stronger this time. He returned a few minutes later and uncorked his usual Cabernet. "How was your day?" he asked. "Just an average day, nothing major." I knew my answer wasn't convincing, and he likely knew it too. He nodded again, saying nothing. The silence between us was thick, unbearable. I felt desperate to break it, say something. Eventually, I managed, "Sorry we missed each other yesterday. I know we've got things to talk about." "We'll talk after dinner," he said, calm as ever. So measured, so perfectly collected. Not a flicker of the storm I felt churning inside. Unlike me, I was certain every emotion I felt was written all over my face. I busied myself by arranging the tableware with precision. I needed the motion, any motion, to keep my hands from trembling. I checked the oven again and again, silently urging the timer to hurry up. Every tick of the clock dragged like molasses. Every minute stretched to absurd lengths. When the alarm finally went off, I sprang into action, yanking open the oven door almost too quickly. Dinner passed in silence, our utensils clinking louder than our words. I mentioned a few scattered details about the gathering the night before. Henry responded with little more than a nod. He noted he had a meeting with the vice president the following week, but I barely registered it. My thoughts wouldn't stay still. His calm exterior only made my agitation worse. How could he appear so untouched while I felt like I was falling apart? We eventually cleared our plates. We loaded the dishwasher in unison. There were a few dishes that needed hand washing, and we handled them quickly. Henry, as always, helped without needing to be asked. Once the kitchen was back in order, I waited for him to begin. He knew I expected him to speak first. I was just trying to brace myself. "Let's sit in the living room," he said at last. "I'm having a brandy before we talk." "Would you like something?" "Yes, a gin and tonic, I think," I said, already reaching for the bottle and a glass. He disappeared briefly into his study, returned with his drink, and sat in the same chair he'd chosen 2 nights ago. I came in from the kitchen and took my place opposite him, the same seat I'd used before. We were on the edge of something, and I could feel it in every muscle. I had no idea what was coming, and it left me frozen inside. Chapter 5. Declaration. Henry. I made a deliberate choice to stay composed. Edie's distress was obvious, and I didn't want to fuel it further. I called her Evelyn, formal and distant. There would be no comfort tonight. Evelyn, I need you to hear everything I'm about to say. This isn't going to be a discussion. You'll listen first. Completely. Once I've said what I need to say, then we'll talk about what comes next. If that's something you can't accept, then there's nothing more to address between us. You'll get your chance to speak, just not today. Do you understand? She stared at me, eyes wide with surprise, clearly taken aback by my tone. She gave a quiet nod. I'll start by telling you what your revelation on Monday night did to me. Above all, I felt deeply disrespected. She began to shift, lips parting, maybe to explain, maybe to defend, but I raised a hand, stopping her cold. She froze, breath caught, posture stiff. I can't believe I allowed things to go on like this. I sat back while you made a fool of me. If you've mistaken my years of patience and care for weakness, let me correct that now. I said it before, and I will say it again. I will not tolerate betrayal. If you ever cross that line again, this marriage will be over, and I won't turn back. Is that absolutely clear? I kept my voice level, my tone resolute. I wanted every word to land with weight. Yes, I understand, but you've smashed the very base of our relationship. You've thrown our loyalty into question. What we had was built on trust, and you've broken that. You've planted seeds of doubt where none existed before. And now I don't even know if we can survive this. I saw her take a sharp breath, eyes widening in disbelief. That struck her hard. And I could tell, now finally. She was wrestling with the same dread that had consumed me. I've had time to think, time to ask myself what comes next after all this. You say you love me. And until Monday night, I had no reason to doubt it. Now, I can't say for certain anymore. She sat up, visibly ready to argue, likely trying to reassure me, maybe even herself. But I met her eyes without a word. She slowly sank back down into her chair, choosing silence. You tell me you would never hurt me, and yet you've humiliated me by giving yourself to someone else. Did you honestly believe that wouldn't devastate me, after everything and after all we've shared? Do you even see who I am? Because right now, I'm not sure I ever truly knew you. I accept full accountability for not speaking up more clearly about my needs in our marriage. I allowed your accomplishments and your public image to eclipse my own presence in this partnership. Now, with some distance, I realize just how damaging that was. I am not, and never will be, someone you can delegate tasks to or treat as an accessory. We entered this marriage as equals, and I will settle for nothing less. It's become undeniable to me, Evelyn, that much of your behavior is rooted in self-interest. You prioritize your desires and how you appear to others, even when it comes at the expense of those closest to you, myself included. But tell me honestly, do the people you surround yourself with genuinely care about you? Could you truly count on any of them in a moment of crisis? Do you ever think about the friends we once held dear? Have you wondered where they are now or what became of them? Because I have. And unlike you, I've kept in touch with many of them. They still welcome me into their lives, into their homes. Have you stopped to consider why we no longer bring them into ours? Is it simply because they no longer serve whatever vision you've crafted for yourself? I let the silence speak for a moment. I saw something flicker across your expression, confusion, maybe pain, as I pressed on. If we're to move ahead, if this relationship has any hope, it's going to require a major change in how you treat me. I'll start attending events with you again, but I won't be a silent bystander. I expect to be acknowledged as your partner. That is my baseline expectation. And if you can't meet it, then there's no reason to keep up the appearance of being a couple. You said nothing. Perhaps I pushed too far. If so, I can live with that. From now on, we'll begin reconnecting with the people who truly mattered to us, our real friends, and we'll welcome them back into our home, like we once did. And you're going to treat them with the dignity and warmth they deserve. These were the people who shared our lives before your obsession with status and image took hold. Did you ever stop to wonder where I was while you moved from gala to recital, from dinner to premiere? I was spending time with the friends who never left. Eventually, they stopped asking about you. They, like I, saw that you had distanced yourself. I know there's another engagement tomorrow, another evening of pleasantries and posed smiles. I won't be going. I've made other plans. But if we continue in this marriage, I will be at future gatherings, on terms I set. For now, I need you to truly absorb everything I've said tonight. I'm not asking for an apology or justification, not yet. What I want is for you to reflect deeply on where we go from here. This Friday, we'll talk again. I'll ask you 3 direct questions, and I expect honest answers. First, do you sincerely want to remain in this marriage? If your answer is yes, are you prepared to fully let go of any involvement, real or imagined, with another man? If your answer is no, I need you to be honest. If that's the case, I'll contact my lawyer and begin the process of divorce immediately. That's not up for debate. Second, you need to understand that my role in this household is about to change dramatically. I will no longer play the part of the passive, invisible spouse. You likely already feel the shift. Third, honesty must return between us. You haven't been forthright, and I need to understand why. We'll have difficult, unfiltered conversations about the state of this relationship, conversations about how trust can begin to be rebuilt. They won't be easy, but ultimately the decision is yours. If you can't be fully honest, if real openness isn't possible, then there's nothing left for either of us to hold on to. I leaned back, emotionally spent, physically exhausted. It felt as though I'd been through a war, and I knew you had taken the brunt of the impact. I'm going for a walk. I need air and space. Don't wait up. I'll continue sleeping in the guest room for now. Perhaps after Friday we can revisit that. Will this give you enough time to think? I asked softly, trying to ease the weight in the room. You nodded slowly. Yes, I think it will. I'll let you know if I... Your voice faltered. You were just as drained as I was, mentally, emotionally. Wounded by words, perhaps, but also beginning to recognize the truth within them. I hadn't held back on her, because I didn't want to. She needed to experience the weight of what I was carrying, to feel the tremors of the shift I knew was coming. This wasn't about being gentle, just respectful. Chapter 6. What Remained. Evelyn. I couldn't find my voice. Henry had hit me with something I never saw coming. He made his stance painfully clear and left the room before I could gather my thoughts, let alone respond. There was no opening for conversation, no invitation to negotiate. I had never encountered this side of him, unflinching, detached, and entirely resolute. He laid down his ultimatum plainly: agree or we end this. No middle ground, no gray area, just a binary choice. The door clicked behind him as he stepped out, supposedly to clear his head. I stayed frozen for a moment, stunned, then wandered into the kitchen and made myself another gin and tonic. This kind of drinking wasn't typical for me, but tonight I needed to dull the edges. My thoughts were all over the place, my body locked with tension. I needed clarity and was getting none. I used to have control of our narrative. Now Henry had seized it, and I couldn't stop him. He asked things I didn't know how to respond to. Of course I wanted to salvage our marriage. Of course I said I would never betray him. But he brushed all that aside like it never happened, as if those reassurances were meaningless. Now I was left with choices, supposedly straightforward, but carrying massive weight. I had 2 days to rethink everything I thought I understood. And that question he asked still haunted me. What did he mean about being honest? I had always believed I was truthful with him. Wasn't that how all of this had begun? By me choosing to be honest? Why was he questioning that now? But worse than his doubt was what he didn't say. Not once did he tell me he loved me. There was no tenderness, no sorrow, only anger and disappointment. Had I completely destroyed the love between us? I didn't know if I could handle the answer. I knew I still loved him. That wasn't in question. But I'd hurt him deeply, and now he was retaliating, not out of cruelty, but like someone cornered and in pain. Still, I couldn't tell if he was fighting for us or simply lashing out. My stomach turned at the thought. I placed the glass down, realizing more alcohol would only cloud my thoughts further. 2 days. Just 48 hours to try to fix 27 years of life together. It felt impossible, but I had to try. I was exhausted, physically and emotionally. Between the stress, the insomnia, and now this confrontation, I could hardly think straight. Go to bed, Edie. Call Jeannie in the morning. Maybe she'll help you make sense of this. Because right now you can't. You just need to sleep. Chapter 7. What Remained. Henry. Stepping outside, I was met with a warm breeze and the soft hues of dusk still hanging in the sky. The air off the river was cool and calming as I made my way toward the center of town. My breathing had evened out. I felt steadier. I'd said what needed to be said, carefully excluding what would only deepen the damage. I left her with the faintest thread to hold on to, but no room to negotiate. There was nothing comforting or redemptive in how I delivered those words. Each sentence was deliberate, sharp, like throwing stones with intent to bruise. And she felt every single one. Eventually, she stopped pushing back. She let the blows land, defenseless. I thought I'd feel something afterward. Maybe a release of pressure. Maybe a grim sort of closure. But I didn't. This wasn't about revenge. It was about forcing her to truly see what stood between us. Our marriage as it was. Our shared past. Whatever might still be salvageable. I didn't let her off the hook. By Friday, I'd know if there was anything left to rebuild, or if it was time to walk away for good. As I kept walking, questions crept in, the kind I hadn't dared say aloud. Did I even want to stay in this marriage? Did I still love her? I made a conscious decision to hold those words back, to not say I loved her. Because deep down, I wasn't sure they were still true, and I refused to offer her a lie just to make this easier. But how can I really know what I feel anymore? I once read that the true test of love is imagining life without the other person, whether by separation, death, or sheer absence. And I couldn't stop asking myself, could I live without her? What kind of future awaited me now? Could I ever truly move beyond the betrayal she dealt me all those years ago and offer her genuine forgiveness? At first, the idea seemed unfathomable. But now I wasn't so sure anymore. What she had done could never be undone. No apology could erase it, not after all this time had passed. Could I face that reality and still go on? Before I could even begin to answer that, she had her own truth to confront. She needed to acknowledge the new hurt she had inflicted, a fresh scar layered on top of old wounds. And what about me, who I'd become? The man I'd reshaped myself into, firm, unyielding, Henry Cooper, remade from the inside out. That transformation, it was the real performance. Deep down, I'd known it all along, even if I'd never said the words. Could I go on living that part? I wasn't convinced I could. Maybe there was a middle ground, someone less combative but no less strong, a version of me I could still recognize. I couldn't return to the man I once was, passive, uncertain, breakable. If I did, Edie would lose every shred of respect for me and maybe find someone who never would. In truth, nothing had changed from the day before. I was still chasing answers, still trying to peel back the layers of who she really was. I'd always had a hunch that she wasn't telling me everything. But where had she hidden those secrets? How much did I really know about the woman I had married? Was she seeing someone else? And even if she was, did I really want confirmation? I couldn't stop myself from wondering whether she had the faintest clue how deeply she had fractured my trust. As the light outside began to fade, I found myself turning back toward the house. My rage from earlier had cooled into a slow burn. So many questions circled in my mind, but not a single answer surfaced. I was stuck in between. No decisions were made, not today. Instead, I had left the next step up to Edie. She would decide the course of our lives. And then it hit me with an almost cruel clarity. I'd handed her control over my future. A bitter twist, really. I thought I'd seized back my power. But in the end, it was Edie who would decide what happened now. Funny how that worked. Chapter 8. Vanes's Advice, Evelyn. For the first time in days, I actually slept through the night. That alone felt like a small miracle, considering how tangled my thoughts had been. I slipped out of bed and padded into the bathroom. A long, hot shower helped lift the heaviness from my mind. The night before, I'd made a call to Vanes before turning in. We agreed to meet for lunch, our usual little cafe. At least one burden had been lifted. Jeannie was safe. That alone was enough to give me a moment's peace. When I got there, Nick, the maitre d', greeted me warmly. "Mrs. Cooper, Miss Moore's already seated," he said, and guided me to our regular table tucked into a quiet corner of the cafe. "Thanks, Nick." "Hi, Vanes. I'm really grateful you could make it." And I meant every word. I needed her guidance more than I could let on. "You know I'd never say no to you, Edie," she replied with that familiar, calming smile. Vanes had always been solid, steady as a rock. We'd been friends for over a decade. Henry had been wrong, so incredibly wrong. I did have someone I could rely on. Vanessa Moore had always been the truest of friends. There was nothing I couldn't share with her, and trust she'd keep it close. She already knew every secret I carried. I spoke to Henry last night, I began. Well, more like he spoke and I listened. He wasn't ready to hear my side of it, not yet. He told me I'd have my chance to speak on Friday. Oh, Vanes, he was so cold, so distant. I hardly recognized him. It was like talking to someone I didn't know. Start at the beginning, she said gently, her calm unwavering. So I did. I told her everything I could remember, every little detail, especially the 3 demands he had made. By the time I was finished, my eyes were brimming with tears. She reached across the table, her hand warm against mine. Breathe, Edie. Just take a moment and breathe. Then after a pause, she asked me calmly, So, what do you plan to say to him tomorrow night? I'm going to tell him the truth, I whispered. That I love him. That I don't want a divorce. That I could never intentionally hurt him like that again. I'll tell him it felt like waking from a terrible dream. That the woman who betrayed him, I don't even recognize her anymore. What else is going on? Lately, he's been insisting on coming with me to these functions. I can't quite pin down why. He mentions wanting to be viewed as my equal. That's odd, especially given how much he used to hate attending my gatherings. I don't know what to make of this shift. Of course, I'll let him join me. But truthfully, I'm not sure what he hopes to gain from showing up. And how do I feel about it? I guess there's a part of me that's relieved to see him stepping up. This is what I've been longing for, to approach things as a united front. Maybe I'll even thank him next time he pushes back and stands with me. Is there anything else bothering you? I don't know how to respond to what he said about my honesty. Because, in all fairness, I did speak to him about how I felt before doing anything. Isn't that what being truthful is supposed to mean? I genuinely don't get what he was implying. No guesses at all? Think again, Edie. Is there something you're terrified to admit out loud? Vanes's gaze locked onto mine, steady, searching, impossible to escape. I couldn't quite see where she was going with it, until suddenly I did. And my stomach dropped. That's something I can never say. If I told him that, it would shatter him completely. One sentence, and our marriage would be rubble. I can't let him know I panicked. But what if he already suspects? He doesn't. He can't. No one knows. Still, Vanes had a point. This is dangerous ground I'm standing on. This didn't come up randomly. He brought it up for a reason. From what I told Vanes about last night, it sounds like he came prepared. This wasn't casual. He's serious. There's intent behind the timing and the topic. Could it be that he already thinks I've been unfaithful? Maybe, Vanes repeated. Are you willing to take that risk? I don't think I have it in me to be completely honest with him. If I am, it could all unravel. And then I'd be left with nothing. You've really put yourself in a mess, haven't you? She said. Her expression was firm. No teasing, no judgment. I dropped my head and nodded. She was right. This was on me. So what now? The thought of losing him is unbearable. I honestly don't think I could survive it. Vanes sat quietly for a few beats, sipping her coffee, deep in thought. At last she spoke. All right, here's some free advice, and we both know what that's worth. Even then, her voice stayed grounded, serious. No jokes this time, she added. If it were me, I'd come clean. Everything. Leave nothing in the dark. That way you won't be tangled up in your own lies. She let a pause settle in before continuing. Then I'd start therapy, just for you, to begin with. You need to understand what drove you to step outside your marriage. I saw someone after Nels left me. They won't hand you all the answers, but they'll make you ask the questions you've been dodging. She shifted slightly in her chair. Then I'd look into couples counseling. No matter how your next conversation with him goes, you're going to need guidance, if the two of you make it through this. And then she said one last thing. Henry's tired of being an afterthought in your story. He wants to be treated like a real partner. Just because you earn more doesn't mean he matters less, unless that's how it's come across. He's a decent man, and he deserves to be valued as one. I sat there taking in every word she said. Her eyes never left mine, and I didn't want them to. There was still one critical obstacle left to face, telling Henry the truth, that I had misled him early in our marriage about not wanting children. That single fear consumed me more than any other. I imagined his response would be volcanic, that my confession would be the final blow to whatever remained of our fragile bond. When I was with Vanes last night, a painful realization struck me. Henry hadn't told me he loved me. Not even once. Maybe we'd already crossed the point of no return. He spoke about a future for us. But what kind of future exists without love? I couldn't bear the thought of living like that. Maybe it would be easier if he were the one to walk away. A deep, aching sadness settled over me. Everything felt as though it were coming apart at the seams, and I didn't know where to begin putting it back together. "Don't give up yet, Edie," Vanes said, her voice quiet and kind. "I truly think he still loves you. But you need to ask him, directly. That question is the turning point. If he didn't care, he wouldn't still be around. He would have left. He wouldn't keep confronting you if he didn't see something left to fight for." She paused for a moment, choosing her words. "He's lost, too. Even if he seems steady, I doubt he feels that way inside. He's waiting, hoping, for a sign that you're willing to help rebuild something he can believe in. But he needs you to take that first step." "All I want is for him to give me a chance," I said. "But he sounds so sure of everything," I added, feeling hopeless. Vanes's words were hard to accept, even though I wanted to believe her. "People don't change overnight, Edie," she said gently. "Henry's not a villain. He's hurt, he's angry, and he's trying to find his footing again after having the ground ripped out from under him. He's acting tough, but I doubt he feels that way inside. Right now, he's waiting on you to take responsibility. He's reacting out of fear, just like you. He doesn't know what comes next either." "You seem so certain," I murmured, still hesitant. "I'm not completely," she admitted. "I wasn't there when everything happened. I'm only hearing your side and doing my best to make sense of it. I've only met Henry once, and just briefly. He may not even remember me." "I'm not sure," I whispered. "Maybe he doesn't. Maybe none of this is clear anymore." The tears threatened again, rising before I could fight them off. We paused to eat, an overdue if temporary break from the emotional storm. Vanes ordered iced tea, and that felt right to me. I wasn't in the mood for anything stronger. The weight of everything we'd talked about had drained me. It was overwhelming. I craved stillness, something quiet, manageable, something I could hold on to for tomorrow. I knew I needed to confront two fundamental questions. What did I want? And what did Henry want? Everything had to begin from there. But the most terrifying part was being honest about my fear of becoming a parent. Henry had once accused me of being selfish, and he wasn't entirely wrong. I had been, for a long time. And selfishness isn't the foundation of a lasting marriage. I wasn't just admitting it to myself anymore, I was saying it aloud to Vanes too. I looked down at my plate and saw I'd been idly shifting the salad around, not really eating. My appetite was gone, which matched the emptiness I felt inside. "Don't lose hope, Edie," Vanes said, her tone tender. "I know this is tearing you apart, and I know you're beating yourself up for choices that can't be undone. But the past is fixed. You can't rewrite it. What matters now is what you choose to do moving forward. What's your plan for tomorrow? You've been given something rare, a real opportunity to heal your marriage. Most women never get that chance. Tomorrow Henry will be listening, all of you, your truth, your regret, your hope, he'll hear it." The spotlight was finally mine. Everything now hinged on how I chose to present myself. Once I had clarity on the message I needed to deliver, once I understood the heart of his worries, once I had mapped a path toward reconciliation, all that remained was the execution. I let out a slow breath and sank into the chair. Vanes had been right from the beginning. What I lacked wasn't courage, it was readiness. This was the kind of preparation I'd done countless times for others in the public eye. Now it was my own moment to step up, to confront Henry. I had to summon the grace and steadiness the situation called for, and gradually a sense of composure began to replace my nerves. I turned to Vanes, gave her a subtle nod. She had seen it clearly from the start. Chapter 9. Uncertainty. Henry. The day dragged. Fridays are usually quiet, but today felt like the silence was pressing in from all sides. It left too much space for my mind to wander, to Edie, to what might unfold tonight. From the moment I woke up, my thoughts were racing. I thought I had a handle on things. But then came the stillness, the long, vacant hours, the doubts creeping in. Had I overstepped with her? Had I demanded too much? There were moments when she seemed genuinely afraid, as if she was bracing for an outburst, expecting me to strike out in anger. Had I let my frustration spiral too far? Had I turned the whole thing into some kind of emotional performance? But if I stripped all that away, what was I really hoping for? What was the actual goal? I couldn't stop circling back to that one question. What I couldn't deny anymore was the truth. I still loved her. That was undeniable, even if it hurt to admit. Why else would she occupy my every thought? Why else would I feel this exposed, this wounded by our disconnect? At the core of all of it, what tore at us most was the truth she hadn't shared. The one she was too afraid to speak aloud. Her unwillingness to accept our children. That was still something I couldn't wrap my head around. Did it make me angry? Of course. Was there forgiveness left in me that I didn't know? Would she even have the courage to say it outright? Another unknown. And would that moment, her confession, be what defined our future? I had no answers. My certainty came and went like waves. One minute I was sure of myself. The next I was drowning in hesitation. We'd shared nearly 30 years, 2/3 of our lives entwined. We had built something real, something deep. I tried to picture a world where she wasn't part of it, and I couldn't. That version of life felt hollow. After so many years, words aren't always needed. It's all there in the quiet, in the closeness, in the small familiar things. The warmth of her beside me at night, even if we weren't touching. The scent of her skin, her steady presence. Those things you never expect to miss until they're gone. 3 decades, and still I had no idea what tonight would bring. Part of me was scared. I'd promised to let her speak freely. No interruptions, no reactions, unless she asked for them. She deserved that space. But what would come after? That remained a complete unknown. Chapter 10. Revelation. Evelyn. Henry walked through the door earlier than usual. It was barely past 5. I didn't know whether to be nervous or relieved. My nerves were already frayed thin, and now this break in routine only added to my unease. But I soon realized there was no cause for alarm. "You're back early," I said. "Yeah," he replied. "Work was dead today, so I left around 4. He gave me a small, easy smile. It was the first genuine one I'd seen all week. "Can I get you something to drink?" I asked. "The usual." He looked composed, more like himself than he had in days. "Yes, please," he said with that same calm tone. He made my gin and tonic the way he always did, but didn't pour any wine for himself. "I'm going to go change," he said softly, smiling again, and then headed upstairs. Within 5 minutes he returned, in a fresh polo shirt, jeans, and loafers. He looked relaxed, almost like someone newly at peace, still carrying that quiet smile. "You seem settled," I said, not sure what to make of it. He poured himself a glass of wine and faced me. "This week's been a hard one, on both of us," he said. "I need to ease up. I've been pushing too hard, and I see that now. Let's have a nice dinner. We can talk afterward." I nodded, feeling a wave of gratitude. "Thank you," I said quietly. "I've been falling apart. I don't even know where to start, what words to use." "Just be yourself," he said with warmth. "Speak from the heart. Tell me your truth, Edie. Please, be honest. Not just with me, but with yourself. That's what truly matters." He called me Edie again, a name I hadn't heard from him all week. That small word carried more weight than I expected. Maybe, just maybe, it meant something had shifted. Still, the air between us hadn't cleared completely. There was one thing left unresolved. Truth. And I hadn't yet found the strength to face it. I made his favorite dinner again. This time, he noticed. We talked, really talked, through the meal. It grounded me. Made me feel like there was still something solid beneath my feet. But deep down, I sensed what was coming next. And I was afraid. Truly afraid. Speaking with Vanes had offered some comfort, but even her words couldn't show me how this might end. I declined a second glass of wine. I knew that if I drank more, I'd lose control, and I needed to stay sharp. Vanes had taught me that. She had lived through the cost of fake courage. She was an alcoholic, now in recovery. Her marriage gone. Her children estranged. The price she paid was steep and merciless. I met her not long after she started attending AA. What struck me was her resilience. She didn't look for scapegoats. She named her battle plainly, addiction. And she fought it head on. I couldn't say the same about myself. My downfall wasn't addiction. It was selfishness. That was the truth of it. I had focused on my desires, my comfort, my cravings. I hadn't seen how blind I'd become. No different from Vane's when she was lost in the bottle. Henry's words had snapped me awake. They tore through the illusions I clung to and forced me to recognize what I had become. I had been self-centered, but I didn't want to stay that way. I knew I could choose a different path. Change was possible. I just had to care more. About him, about others, about something beyond myself. And I meant to. I would. After we cleared the dishes, we moved to the living room. Same places, same silence as that Wednesday night. But this time it was on me. My turn to speak. Where to begin? I exhaled slowly, then said his name. Henry. My voice trembled. I need to start with a sincere apology. I'm sorry, genuinely, for all the pain I've caused. And for the foolishness it took to even imagine you'd be okay with what I was thinking. I don't know what got into me. It didn't come from reason. And worse, I can't even explain what triggered it. But I swear it was never about you. Not once did I question your love, or your passion, or the tenderness you always show me. You've always been attentive. You've always made me feel wanted, cherished. Somewhere along the way, I lost sight of that. Maybe I became too used to it. So used to being supported that I forgot to value what I had. That's my burden to carry. You once said I had no real friends. You were wrong. There is someone. Vanessa Moore, Vane's. She's the person I confide in when I can't talk to anyone else. The only one besides you I truly trust. She listens without judging. She never gossips. She's lived through pain most people can't imagine. And she's never sugar-coated things with me. Her guidance means something. I should have listened. She told me straight out that I was being reckless. She warned me not to take you for granted. Told me you were the kind of husband women prayed for. She was honest. If you ever discovered what I had been considering, there would be consequences beyond my control. She was right. Of course she was. Still, in my misguided hope, maybe out of cowardice, I thought that if I came to you honestly, if I explained how I was feeling, you might understand. I wasn't trying to deceive you. I never wanted to keep secrets. And I swear to you, hurting or embarrassing you was the last thing on my mind. I just didn't think it through. I acted like a fool. But I'm not running from that now. But I did, didn't I? I tore you down. I made you feel small. Just saying what I wanted was enough to wound you. I searched Henry's face, trying to read him. I didn't even know what kind of reaction I was hoping for. Still, he just sat there, collected, unmoved. I continued anyway. I don't even know how to put into words the regret I feel for the way I treated you, how deeply sorry I am. I understand that saying sorry won't undo the damage. Vane's recommended I see someone, a therapist she trusts. She believes this person can help me, and I think she's right. I need that support. I need to understand what drove my behavior. I've decided to reach out next week. I'm hoping she'll agree to work with me. I need you to hear this. I'll do whatever it takes to heal our relationship. I love you more than I've ever loved anything. The idea of losing you, it terrifies me. I'm begging you to let me try to make amends. I'll do whatever's necessary to keep us together. Vane's also brought up couples therapy. If you're open to it, I'm fully on board. I want our future to be shared. Nothing matters more to me than that, not even my career. If being with her is something you need to leave behind, I'll end it, right now. There's nothing more important in my life than you. I know I've acted selfishly, but I believe I can become someone better. I can rebuild the connections I neglected. I can become more thoughtful, more present for you. This isn't out of reach for me. I haven't forgotten how to love people fully. I just stopped remembering to do it. I stopped needing to gather myself. My eyes stayed fixed on Henry. He still looked calm, but his gaze had a guarded quality. His eyes showed that he was hearing me, absorbing it all. Henry, I need you to understand something without question. I've never been unfaithful, not once. And I never will be. Even the idea of that kind of betrayal makes me sick. Seeing how much hurt I've already caused, I couldn't stand being responsible for something even worse. I paused again, watching his face for any shift. He didn't flinch. He stayed silent, his thoughts unreadable. I couldn't tell if he believed what I was saying. I know I haven't been the partner you deserve. I haven't treated you like you're the center of my world. And you are. That's part of the selfishness I let control me. But that ends now. You matter far too much for me to keep this private. I'd say it in front of anyone. Friends, colleagues, strangers. I'm so deeply ashamed of the way I behaved. I made you feel like you didn't matter. You asked for honesty. Not just with you, but with myself. That's what I've tried to offer today. What you said last night, it cut straight through me. I'm still feeling it. Yes, it scared me. But more than that, it woke me up. It's taken me a long time to look at the ways I've hurt you, not only by making you doubt my faithfulness, but also in the countless smaller ways that were just as painful. Realizing you were right, it broke something in me. I had to face parts of myself I didn't want to admit existed, things I had pushed away for too long. But I'm trying now, Henry. I've told you the truth today. I haven't lied. I have never cheated. And I never will. I can finally see where I failed you. As your wife, your partner. That's something I have to change. And I will change it. If I can say only one final thing, let it be this. I love you. With everything I have, I love you. My feelings for you haven't changed. Not since the very beginning, when we first crossed paths. That simple truth has held firm all this time, and I can't imagine it ever fading. But before anything else can be said, I have to ask you, do you still love me? There wasn't much more I could offer. That was everything. I had nothing left to add. I had responded to each of his questions, addressed all his accusations. My sincerity couldn't have been clearer. And once again I felt hollow. Everything I had been holding inside came pouring out in just a few short minutes. The tears had dried. Crying wasn't something I did easily, I was aware of that. But they had come, and now they were gone. What lingered was the waiting, for Henry to come to a decision. I leaned back in the chair, facing the man I still called my husband. His face was hidden behind his hands. When he finally brought them down, I saw the tears. They weren't theatrical. There was no sobbing, no dramatic collapse, just quiet, steady tears sliding down his cheeks as he looked at me, with the most sorrowful expression I'd ever seen him wear. "I'm sorry, Edie," he said softly. "I believe you. I believe you've stayed faithful. I believe your heart is in the right place. I believe you still care deeply. And I believe you feel genuine remorse for what's happened." He paused, then his gaze shifted. Something had changed in it. "But I don't believe you've been completely honest with me." I drew in a sharp breath. What was he getting at? I saw it clearly in his face. The pain was real. "There's something you buried," he continued. "Something you kept locked away for years. Something that wounded me more than I ever realized back then. I think you wanted to tell me truly. But in the end, you couldn't bring yourself to speak the words, could you?" He asked me that, and all I could do was nod. He already knew the truth. How he came to find out, I didn't know, and at this point, it didn't matter. What mattered was this. He knew, and he couldn't forgive me. At that moment, I understood it was finished. There was no saving what we had. I sank back in the chair, feeling the weight of finality. "You took something from me. Something that meant everything," he said. "You robbed me of a future I'd longed for, of the life we planned, of children we never had, of even the hope of grandchildren we'll never meet. You were aware of how deeply I wanted that. We both said we wanted that kind of life. But somewhere along the line, your heart shifted. And without telling me, without letting me in, you made a choice on your own. And you took it all away." His voice caught slightly, but he pushed through it. "If you had only told me the truth, if you'd trusted me enough to be honest, I think I could have found it in myself to forgive you, even now. But you didn't. You never have." His words settled over the room like a verdict. "I'll have my lawyer draft the papers on Monday. While you're traveling next week, I'll come and collect my things. Tonight, I'm packing just the basics and heading to a hotel. I'll text you which one, in case anything urgent comes up. And just so you know, I'm leaving TCNW. They're downsizing, and they offered me a solid exit package. Once things calm down, I'm going to start my own company. There's still plenty I want to accomplish. I'll keep myself occupied." He looked at me once more, his voice threaded with quiet grief. "I'm sorry, Edie. I truly hoped you'd have the courage to tell me what you were holding back. I'm sorry that you couldn't. I wish you well." Then I watched him stand, his face still streaked with tears, and walk away, up the stairs, out of the room, away from me. I sat there, paralyzed. I couldn't move. No words came to my lips. Every part of me wanted to call out, to plead with him to stay, to ask him to hold me, protect me, love me like he once had. But I remained silent. I only stared at the empty chair where he had been. It stood unoccupied, as empty as the hollow space that now lived inside my heart. Final chapter, Henry. I was relieved I didn't have to immediately dive into a job search or overhaul my entire existence. After a chaotic week that turned everything upside down, I needed time to catch my breath. I found a charming apartment in Cambridge, small enough to feel manageable, warm enough to feel like home. I chose colors that soothed me, arranged the furniture to my taste, and gradually turned it into a sanctuary. It felt like a gentle beginning. I gave myself permission to step back. I needed to put miles between myself and everything tied to Edie. I craved a place that held no memories, no ghosts. So, with no emotional residue to haunt me, I headed to a place where I could disappear into the background. It was May when I left for southern France. I rented a car and made my way from Monaco to Narbonne, then wound through Marseille and continued north to Orange. I soaked in the landscapes, let the language wash over me, indulged in local food. Every sensation felt like part of the healing. For a while I found calm. I spent an afternoon at a coastal cafe in Saint-Maxime, just a tiny spot called Sea, watching the waves move like clockwork. I wondered, could I really settle here? My needs were simple. I could earn enough to live, and with the right tools, manage my work remotely. Maybe, if I surrendered to the rhythm of this place, the past version of me would slowly fade. Maybe, but not just yet. I'm going back to Boston. I still have more untangling to do. I'm still figuring out how to truly be by myself. Final chapter, Evelyn. Veins pulled me out of the ruins left by my crumbling marriage. I was a wreck, barely able to think straight, incapable of working, stunned by everything that had unfolded. I lingered in the house, mechanically keeping up appearances at work, but I was running on empty. Then Veins stepped in. She flew me out to Seattle, then swept me away on an Alaskan cruise. That distant, hushed escape was the buffer I hadn't realized I needed. And thank God for Jeannie. She's kept me anchored through it all. Somehow, the company is still standing. I've got an exceptional team who've carried it through. I've been absent from the social scene, but with the divorce being so public, I think most people have given me grace. Jeannie and I are both in a place where work is no longer a necessity. We've saved well, enough to live comfortably for the rest of our lives. I've always been cautious with finances. Even during the divorce, I had to argue with Henry's lawyer to ensure he received more than he was asking for. He would have walked away with nothing, even though he deserved far more. He never asked for much, never did. I don't expect to fall in love again. I'm not ready to let anyone else step into Henry's shadow. And even if someone like that appeared, I don't think I could face the possibility of repeating the mistakes I made with him. I'll stay by myself, not necessarily lonely, but on my own. I still have Veins. I still have colleagues and friends, but Henry is no longer mine. There will never be another Henry. There never was.